Thanksgiving used to be sacred, not because it was perfect or full of joy, but because it was the one day I could almost pretend I belonged. I'd still show up early to help, still bring the same cranberry dish no one touched, still sit at the end of the table like a quiet fixture in the room. It wasn't gratitude they served, it was tradition, and I played my part. So when I checked the mailbox that afternoon and didn't find the usual cream-colored envelope with the gold-embossed "You're invited" from Malvina, I told myself it was just late. The mail ran slow. Maybe the printer ran out of ink. Maybe something. Still, my hands stayed in the mailbox longer than necessary. I texted Alara, not to ask, of course, just to see how prep was going. Her reply came quickly. "Didn't you get the group update?" That was it. No follow-up. No explanation, just silence. I stared at the message for a long time, like maybe if I blinked hard enough, another bubble would appear. But nothing did. Later that evening, I opened the family group chat, only to realize I couldn't. It was gone. Or rather, I was gone. Removed. No warning. No word. Just out. Keenan was coloring at the kitchen table. He looked up when he saw my face. "Did Grandma forget us this year?" I smiled, like I always do when my heart cracks in places it's already been broken. "Maybe she's just busy." He nodded and kept coloring, believing me because he still could. I went to pour myself some water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand. It wasn't rage, not even sadness, just that old familiar feeling of being pushed aside like I was never really meant to be there in the first place. It's funny how silence becomes your native language after years of learning not to ask questions that no one plans to answer. I remembered the last time I spoke in that group chat. It was after Harlan passed. I wrote, "Thank you all for the prayers." No one responded. The next morning, I folded Keenan's laundry with the same care I folded my grief. Shirts sorted by color, socks matched like little efforts at control. At the library, I shelved books while nodding politely to strangers who didn't know that my world was shrinking. At lunch, I sat alone, scrolling through emails. I noticed one about the family gift exchange. My name wasn't listed, not even in the CC. I searched my name again. Nothing. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a slap. It was worse. It was being deleted in real time, and no one saw anything wrong with it. I didn't feel angry, just reduced. I was never angry. I was invisible. That night, Keenan brought out a folded construction paper card. On the front was a crayon turkey with too many feathers. Inside, in his careful, second-grade handwriting, "I love you, Grandma. Happy Thanksgiving," he said. "Can we give it to her Thursday?" I nodded, because how do you tell a child that love sometimes doesn't bounce back? When he went to bed, I pulled out my journal, flipped past pages of unspoken things. I wrote one line. Should I be the bigger person, or just stop pretending to be welcome? I stared at it, and then came his voice from the room down the hall, soft, almost a whisper. "I hope Grandma likes my card." It hit deeper than anything anyone else had said. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. The same cycle, the same silence. I couldn't sleep. Late into the night, I scrolled through Facebook. There it was, Alara's post. Thanksgiving planning night. Can't wait to see everyone. Everyone. The photo had smiling faces, wine glasses, pie crusts in progress. I zoomed in. On the fridge behind them, a color-coded schedule. Names scribbled in marker. Alara, Rachel, Tom, even the new neighbor's daughter-in-law. Not mine, not Keenan's. 12 likes. One comment. So excited. I closed my phone. Tucked the blanket a little tighter around Keenan, who'd wandered into my bed sometime after midnight. He moved in his sleep and mumbled something. I didn't catch it. "It's okay," I whispered, but it wasn't. The school conference was set for 3:15. I left work a little early, signed out without saying much, and made the short drive over. It was one of those clear sky afternoons, deceptively calm. The kind where you think nothing bad can happen. I remember thinking that. I remember wishing it were true. Keenan's teacher, Ms. Hall, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She motioned for me to sit across from her desk. Her hands folded over a notepad, pen still tucked neatly along the spiral. She cleared her throat, glanced briefly at the door, then back to me. Keenan is doing well, academically, socially. He's respectful, bright. I nodded. Then came the pause. That uncomfortable shift when praise gives way to a subject neither of us wanted to be first to touch. But he's shared a few things recently, personal things. My stomach tightened. Things about your family, about his grandmother. I wanted to check in, to make sure everything at home is, well. I stayed still. What did he say? She looked down for a second, then carefully back up. He mentioned something about a document you were made to sign after his grandfather passed. I didn't breathe. I just sat there. She waited, like maybe I'd jump in with context or a denial or something. Anything. But I had nothing ready. I'd buried that chapter so deep I forgot how fast a child's mouth could unearth it. After I left the building, I didn't drive home right away. I parked under a sycamore tree near the back of the lot and just sat. The memory of that day came rushing back, sitting in Malvina's kitchen, hands trembling as I signed papers I didn't fully understand. The silence that followed, the shift in power that never reversed. Back home, after dinner and dishes and pretending nothing had changed, I sat on Keenan's bed while he colored. I asked him, "Hey, what did you talk to your teacher about today?" He didn't even look up. I told her Grandma made you give her everything after Grandpa died. Remember the paper? I forced a smile, nodding slowly. He looked up then. Was that bad? No, baby, I said softly. It wasn't bad. It was just something we don't usually talk about. He nodded once, then went back to coloring. But I didn't. The storm in my mind had started to swell, and it didn't let up. 2 days later, I picked him up from school like usual. The car line moved slow. Everyone in town took their time, always with something to say or show off. A woman I barely knew from the PTA walked past my car window and smiled that tight-lipped kind of smile people give when they're about to say something they think is clever. So, you're the complicated family, huh? She didn't wait for a response, just kept walking. I rolled the window up, heart sinking. At home, I checked the local Facebook group, one of those closed neighborhood circles filled with bake sale flyers and lost pet notices. Someone had posted a short clip from a PTA planning meeting. I clicked. There was Ms. Hall's voice, clear as day. Let's just be mindful of the Ridgeway kid, family situations, layered. The word echoed louder than it had any right to. No one had tagged me, but I was still in the group. The likes and comments had already started to pile up. That night at the grocery store, I felt the stares, the subtle shifts. The way 2 moms from Keenan's class stopped mid-conversation when I walked down the aisle. At the library where I worked, a coworker passed me in the hallway, smiling too wide, too fast, then disappeared into the back room without a word. It's not that I was ashamed of what happened back then. It's that I never expected to have it resurfaced by the one person I thought I was protecting from it. I wasn't angry at Keenan. I was angry at how quickly people picked up stones when you're already on your knees. The town was too small for secrets, and too self-righteous to hold them with grace. That night, Keenan brought home another card, another crayon creation meant for Grandma Malvina. This one had a folded turkey and tiny handprints. He held it up proudly. Think she'll like it? I bit my tongue, because I wanted to scream that she didn't deserve it, that she'd taken everything from us and still walked around like a saint. But instead, I said, I think she'll appreciate the thought. He smiled. I tucked him in like always, read the same story, turned off the light. But long after his breathing slowed and the room grew still, I stood at the window, watching nothing. The truth never stays buried, I whispered, even when it was meant to die. It started with a photo, just another post from Alara, tucked between a pie recipe and someone asking about a lost dog in the community group. I almost scrolled past it, but then I saw the caption. Family means everything. Last weekend was special. I clicked it open, A professionally framed family portrait taken in Malvina's backyard, under the same maple tree where Harlan and I used to sit with coffee. Everyone was there. Alara, Tom, the cousins, even Malvina with her signature scarf and tight smile. Except me, except Keenan. Our faces were never part of the frame. No tags, no mention. It was like we didn't exist in their version of the story. One of the comments caught my eye. "This will look great next to the Thanksgiving portraits." 12 likes, some heart emojis, a few beautiful family compliments. I didn't respond. I didn't scroll further. I just stared, remembering the last time I saw a photo of myself on that wall in Malvina's hallway. It was the year before Harlan passed. He had insisted on including me in the family Christmas card, even though no one else had asked. That photo disappeared a few months after his funeral. I had assumed it cracked or got lost in the shuffle. Turns out, it was replaced. 2 days later, I offered to pick up Alara's daughter, Hannah, from piano class. She climbed into the passenger seat with her usual energy and a handful of half-eaten crackers. We chatted about school, pets, and a Thanksgiving play she was in. Then, in passing, she said something that stopped my breath mid-sentence. Grandma cleaned the shelves. She put all the old pictures in the attic, said only the good ones should be out now. She didn't mean harm. She didn't know what she'd just done. I smiled, nodded, and turned the volume up on the radio. That evening, after Keenan went to bed, I pulled out the old album from the back of the hallway cabinet, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside was the last picture I had with Harlan before he got sick. We were standing in front of the church, Keenan on his shoulders, all of us laughing. The photo had faded, the edges curled, the ink on the back was smudged, but I could still read it. Thanksgiving, 2013. We made it. The next day, I texted Alara. "Hey, I think I left my white casserole dish at Malvina's last year. Mind if I swing by and grab it?" She replied almost immediately. "Sure, I'm here now. Come anytime." I drove over in silence. It was mid-afternoon. Light filtered through the curtains, like it had no idea what it was landing on. Alara opened the door with her usual strained warmth. Come in, it's in the kitchen somewhere." I thanked her, stepped in, and let my eyes adjust. The wall of family photos in the living room had changed. No longer a collage of generations, it was now a curated display. Framed quotes, flower prints, tasteful candles, not a single image of me, or Keenan. Or Harlan. While waiting, I opened a cabinet near the hallway. A dusty frame sat there, face down behind a row of holiday mugs. It was the photo from the church, ours, covered in fingerprints. Alara walked past me, pausing just long enough to notice what I held. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Back home, I set the picture next to Keenan's drawing of a turkey in a pilgrim hat. The frame looked out of place, like a stranger in its own home. I stood back and stared at it. "They didn't just forget me," I said out loud to the empty room. "They replaced me." I thought back to our wedding photo. After the divorce, I found it flipped backward on Malvina's shelf. She said, "It didn't feel right having it up anymore." And now? It was a pattern. I wondered how many mothers, daughters, sisters had been boxed up and stored away like seasonal decorations, rewritten out of the narrative the moment they stopped serving someone else's story. You don't have to scream to be erased, I thought. You just have to not be useful. That night, Keenan sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through his school project folder. He looked up at me. "Will we be in the Thanksgiving photo this year?" I didn't lie. I said, "We'll take our own photo this year." I pulled out the old digital camera from the drawer, the one Harlan used to use, set it on a stack of books, hit the timer, sat beside Keenan on the couch and smiled. The picture was blurry, slightly off-center, but it was ours. I printed it out on the home printer, taped it to the fridge, and pressed a magnet over the top corner to hold it steady. In my journal that night, I wrote one line. "If they've made room for silence, I'll fill it with truth." The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was closing up the circulation desk when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway, habit, not curiosity. "Mrs. Ridgway, this is Mrs. Cole, Keenan's school counselor. Do you have a moment? I stepped into the break room and sat down. She sounded kind, but rehearsed, like she'd practiced this. We've been asked to address a delicate matter involving Keenan's recent behavior, she began. I frowned. What behavior? A pause. Then, the name. It's been raised by your mother-in-law, Mrs. Hargrove. The cold settled in my chest. She's requested we take steps to restore familial trust. One idea that was suggested, purely optional of course, is a brief statement from Keenan at tomorrow's school assembly. Something simple, a note of apology, to help clear the air. Apology? I didn't even ask what he was apologizing for. I already knew. They wanted him to say he was sorry for telling the truth. I gripped the edge of the table. They want a child to shoulder the weight of their silence, I whispered, more to myself than her. Mrs. Cole, still warm and patient, said, It's meant as a healing moment. But healing, I've learned, only works when the wound is theirs, too. The next morning came quicker than I was ready for. I dropped Keenan off and parked across the street, walking toward the school gym like I was walking into court. The bleachers were packed. Parents, faculty, the local paper's photographer. Malvina's group was sponsoring the event. It said so right there on the program. Thanksgiving Assembly, honoring legacies of grace. I sat near the middle, not too close, not too far. I didn't want to be noticed, and I didn't want to miss anything. The principal stepped up, polished as always, and welcomed everyone. Speeches began, about kindness, family, the silent heroes of tradition. Then came the slideshow, photos of smiling kids with their grandparents. A shot of Malvina with Keenan from years ago, cropped tightly around them, no trace of me. And then I heard it. Keenan Ridgway, would you please come to the stage? I stood. So did a few other parents. But Keenan was already up, looking a little confused, but smiling, still too young to know what was coming. The counselor met him halfway, whispered something, and handed him a folded index card. I started moving down the steps, not running, but fast enough to catch the moment before it slipped. Keenan opened the card, stared at the words. The microphone hummed as he stepped forward. I'm sorry for saying things that hurt my family. He stopped, looked up, found me in the crowd. I didn't nod, didn't shake my head. I just watched him, my hands balled at my sides. He stared at the card again, then gently folded it and tucked it in his pocket. Then he leaned into the mic. I'm sorry Grandma felt bad, but I didn't lie. The silence was instant. The air went still. The principal clapped, one awkward beat, like he wasn't sure if it was over or just beginning. Others joined in, hesitant. Malvina sat in the front row. Her lips pressed into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Her cheeks flushed, but her hands stayed folded in her lap. Controlled, calculated. I sat back down and whispered to no one. That's my son. After the assembly, I waited by the car. Keenan came out, chatting with a friend about lunch like nothing happened. I smiled at him, buckled his seatbelt, and drove toward the exit. That's when the security guard waved me forward, then leaned toward the window. Guess you stirred the pot, huh? I gave a small nod, said nothing, but inside, something simmered, stirred the pot. Like truth was a recipe better left unseasoned. I thought about every time I'd stayed quiet, for peace, for order, for family. Swallowed words, reshaped myself to fit their comfort, but this time, they'd come for my child. And he didn't back down. That night, back home, Keenan curled up on the couch with his sketchbook. He looked up, blinking. Did I do bad? I crouched next to him, took his hand. No, baby, I said. You did brave. After he went to bed, I climbed into the attic and rummaged through the storage boxes until I found it. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, untouched for years. Harlan's will. The original. The one Malvina had made me sign again, under pressure, under pretense, under silence. I brought it downstairs, placed it on the table, and stared at it. If they want to play this out in public, I said out loud, let's see how they handle truth with witnesses. I sat with it a while, then opened my journal and wrote just one line. The silence ends now. Thanksgiving week was already heavy, but that morning added a new kind of weight. Keenan and I had spent the night before carefully folding his hand-drawn turkey into a frame, bright with color, full of love. It was meant for Malvina. He added stickers, little hearts, and signed it in red marker. To Grandma, from Keenan. He beamed when he handed it to me, proud of his work. A few days later, I opened Facebook during my break at the library, and there she was, Malvina, holding that very same frame. Except this time the caption read, "From Alara's kids, always so thoughtful." I stared at the screen, zoomed in. Keenan's signature was gone, literally wiped away, replaced with a name tag taped over the bottom corner. I didn't comment, I didn't save the photo, I just stared and stared until the screen dimmed. They weren't just rewriting credit. They were rewriting the story, reassigning value, repositioning memory. Later that week, the school sent a letter home. Keenan had been selected for the Kindness and Courage Award at the upcoming assembly. I helped him pick out a nice shirt, clean jeans. I planned to get there early, find a good seat, maybe even take a video to send Harlan's brother, who always asked about Keenan. When we walked into the auditorium, I saw the banner strung across the stage. Celebrating Character, sponsored by the Hargrove Family Trust. The principal was all smiles. Alara was already seated in the front row, next to Malvina. I took a spot in the back, phone ready. When Keenan's name was called, I stood slightly to get a better view. Then I heard it. Joining Keenan on stage to accept this award is his aunt, Alara Gaskell, representing the family. My feet didn't move, but my chest dropped. Alara rose gracefully, walked up like it was always meant to be her. She stood beside Keenan, smiled for the camera, accepted the award envelope with her name printed across the top. I didn't blink. I just kept my phone steady, recording the moment I was edited out of. Afterward, the principal thanked the family for their continued support in shaping great students. No glance in my direction, no name. At home, I didn't cry. I unplugged the landline, turned off Facebook, ignored the buzz of unread messages. I cleaned the counters, the already washed dishes, the perfectly folded laundry, scrubbed baseboards no one would ever notice. And still, I could hear Harlan's voice. People can only step on you if you lie down first. I grabbed a post-it note, wrote the quote down, stuck it to the fridge, didn't cry. But something burned behind my ribs, like heat collecting in places grief had already hollowed out. Later that evening, I looked through Keenan's baby photos to pick one for the family scrapbook the school asked for. But the framed photo I always kept in the living room drawer was gone. I checked the other drawers. Then I remembered, after Harlan's obituary was published, Malvina had handed me a clipping. "Don't worry," she said. "We used Alara's name for simplicity." It had read, "Survived by his loving daughter-in-law, Alara." No correction, no update, no apology. Now it was happening again. But this time, they weren't erasing me. They were absorbing Keenan, folding him into a narrative where I never existed. You're not just invisible when you're missing. You're erased when you're replaced. That night, Keenan crawled into bed beside me. He looked up, eyes soft. "Mom, we're still family, right?" I kissed his forehead. "You're mine. Always." After he fell asleep, I went to my desk and pulled out a worn envelope. Harlan's original will. I hadn't looked at it in years, but now, I needed to see dates, signatures. I needed confirmation. I opened my laptop, started typing a message to the family attorney. "Hi, I need to confirm the last changes made to Harlan's estate documents. Original was dated October 2014. Can we talk?" I didn't hesitate before hitting send. Then I opened my journal, wrote one sentence. "If they insist on rewriting history, I'll bring the receipts." The invitation didn't come by email. Alara called. "Said it like a favor. I know it's short notice, but we could really use your help setting up tomorrow. You've always had an eye for how to make things look beautiful." I paused. For a second, I almost asked if Malvina knew I was being invited, or if I was being assigned, but I didn't. I said I'd come. Maybe, just maybe, this was the olive branch. Or if not for me, for Keenan. Midday sun was cutting sharp across the windows when I arrived. The house was already buzzing. Laughter from the kitchen, the scent of cloves and cinnamon in the air. Alara opened the door wearing heels and lip gloss, holding a clipboard like she was stage managing a play. "Perfect timing," she chirped. "Here." She handed me an apron. "You always know how to make everything look perfect." No name tag, no welcome drink, just a folded apron. I slipped it on, didn't say a word. Inside, I laid out silverware, aligned the folded napkins, adjusted plates to match the spacing. I'd done this before, just never like this. As I leaned over the table, smoothing a crease in the table runner, I noticed the place cards, each one handwritten in Alara's cursive: Malvina, Tom, Alara's kids, even Rachel's boyfriend, who'd only been around for 3 months. No card for me, none for Keenan. I cleared my throat and asked as casually as I could, "Should I add ours?" Alara didn't look up from her list. "Oh, no, you're just helping with prep. Malvina thought it might be too awkward otherwise." I nodded slowly, kept arranging forks. Invisible labor, silent hands, not a guest, not family. A cousin walked in and glanced my way. "You catering this year?" I smiled, just enough to hide the sting. My grip on the butter knives tightened. That night, the memory came back out of nowhere. Harlan's last Thanksgiving. He'd pulled me to the center of the room with his quiet authority, handed me the carving knife. "Tired of hearing everyone else," he'd said. "This house should hear your voice for once." And they did. Just that year. Just once. I'd forgotten that warmth until I stood there again, wearing an apron, folding napkins, not being seen. I stepped outside. The breeze hit harder than I expected. Sat down on the bench by the garden, away from the voices. I pulled out my phone and opened a message draft to Malvina. "This stops tomorrow." I typed it, read it, didn't send it. I saved it. Keenan arrived a few minutes later. Alara had sent for him, said he could drop off his school project for the table display. He walked in proudly, holding his construction paper turkey in a frame. Before he could even say anything, a woman looked over and said, "Oh, you with the catering, hun? Could you help refill the pitcher?" Keenan blinked, then turned to me. "Are we the helpers now?" I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't upset, just confused. That's when something inside me, whatever had been quiet, whatever had swallowed every dismissal up to now, stood up. And so did I. I walked into the kitchen, took off the apron, folded it, and placed it on the granite counter like I was returning something that never belonged to me. Alara was there, organizing wine glasses. She looked up, half smiling. "All set?" I didn't raise my voice. "You've mistaken my kindness for permission," I said. "That won't happen again." Her smile faltered, just slightly. I didn't wait for her reply. I found Keenan by the entryway, took his hand. We walked out. The air outside felt heavy and clean, all at once. At home, I didn't sit down. I went straight to the printer, pulled up the scanned copy of Harlan's original will, the one with his handwriting, his signature, the one Malvina had forced me to overwrite after the funeral. I printed 3 copies. I put them in a folder. Then I wrote in my journal, "Tomorrow, they'll meet the woman I was before I learned to shrink." The envelope was off-white, no return address, no signature, just my name, printed faintly in what looked like a half-used ink cartridge. Inside, a single card. "You are cordially invited to the annual Women's Thanksgiving Tribute, hosted by the Hargrove Legacy Circle." No time listed, no location, just a logo, and the phrase, "An afternoon of gratitude and grace." It felt more like a formality than a gesture, like someone had printed 50 and decided to send me one at the last second to avoid legal guilt or moral backlash. Still, I went. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. The event was held at the community center. White tablecloths, paper centerpieces shaped like turkeys, and every woman in town who ever wore church heels on a weekday. I checked the program. My name wasn't listed. No seat reserved. No acknowledgement of my RSVP. Alara greeted me with a smile that was more muscle than warmth. "Oh, you came. We didn't think you'd actually show." But you're welcome to observe, of course. Observe. I nodded and took a seat in the back. Sometimes you watch the theater just to see who's writing the script. A few speeches came and went, school principals, church leaders, a retired nurse. Then Malvina took the stage. The microphone was kind to her voice. Polished, controlled. She thanked everyone for their contributions to generational wisdom, then moved on to her tribute. I've been blessed, she began, to be surrounded by women of quiet strength, women who serve without complaint, women who understand that legacy is not made from noise, but from quiet faith. She named names: Elara, Elara's mother. Two other daughters-in-law I hadn't seen in years, a neighbor who once brought her soup when she was ill. No mention of me, not even a side nod. She ended with, "Some women build quietly, some just watch." The applause was generous. I didn't clap. I sat there, skin hot, heart slow. Cheeks burning in that way that says, "Don't cry now. You're in public." A woman 2 rows ahead turned, glanced, and looked away just as quickly. Another whispered something to her friend. They both nodded. Afterward, I walked to the restroom, not to cry, just to breathe. The water was cold. I washed my hands slowly, let the silence settle. From behind a stall, voices, casual, careless. "She just shows up for pity, always has." Another voice. "Some people wear victimhood like a necklace." My hands stopped moving. They stepped out of the stall seconds later, saw me standing there. We locked eyes. They froze. One of them opened her mouth, then shut it again. I smiled politely and walked right past them. But inside, something cracked. Not shattered, just cracked enough to let something new in. When I got home, I didn't hang up my coat. Didn't even take off my shoes. I walked to the fireplace, threw the invitation into the flames. Then I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping, Harlan's will, the letters he wrote before he passed, documents Malvina thought I'd lost. I laid them on the table, page by page. The stack wasn't tall, but it was heavy with truth. I opened Keenan's video file, the one I hadn't shared. Not yet. Watched him speak again, in that clear, unfiltered voice. I just said the truth. He didn't say it to hurt anyone. He said it because no one else would. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I was done performing. I was done defending myself against people who'd already made up their minds. I wasn't fighting to be welcomed back. I was fighting to not disappear. I sent one email to the family group, still blocked, but I knew someone would see it through their shared iCloud logins. "Please make sure there's room at the table. I'll be bringing something you forgot you had." No reply. But I saw the read receipt. That night, I packed the will, the video file. A copy of the very first Thanksgiving invitation I ever got, from Harlan himself. He'd handwrote my name, misspelled it, but it meant something. I folded it gently, placed it on top. Then I opened my journal. Wrote one sentence. I was never too small. They just built tables too narrow. The driveway was full when we pulled in. Keenan adjusted his collar in the back seat while I sat for a few more seconds with the car running. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. But my hands were steady in a way that told me something final was coming. We walked up the steps together. Not fast, not slow. Keenan carried the small wrapped box in both hands like it was something sacred. I had my purse. Inside, a USB, a printed will, and a truth that had waited long enough. Elara opened the door. Her eyes flicked to the package in Keenan's hands, then back to me. "Right on time," she said, with a smile that looked more like obligation than welcome. Inside, the air was warm. Too warm. Perfume, cinnamon, and performance. Malvina turned when she saw us. "Didn't expect you to join after everything," she said, a sugar knife buried in velvet. I nodded once. "You invited everyone, didn't you?" Our name cards were at the far end of the table, written in pencil. Everyone else's were inked, personalized, decorated. We sat. Dinner started like all their dinners did, polished, timed, punctuated by toasts and stories from people who loved hearing their own voices. I cut my turkey, helped Keenan with his mashed potatoes, and waited. Midway through the meal, Malvina rose from her seat, tapped her glass twice. "I wanted to add something special this year," she began. "A tribute to gratitude, unity, and what it means to be family." She motioned to Alara, who unveiled a poster board full of photos, smiling faces, pumpkin carving, 4th of July cookouts. None of me, none of Keenan. Then the lights dimmed. A video began to play, clips stitched together from family members thanking Malvina, singing her praises, sharing how much she'd meant to them. And then came Keenan's face. I sat up. It was the video he'd made for school weeks ago. Except, the words weren't right. They'd been cut, rearranged. He said, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean to hurt you. I want to make things right." Gasps, soft claps. One cousin whispered, "That was brave." Malvina smiled. "Wasn't that brave?" she said to the room. Keenan turned toward me, his eyes wide, confused. He tugged on my sleeve. "That's not what I gave them," he whispered. I stood, calm, quiet, unapologetic. I reached into my bag, pulled out the USB and the envelope, walked to the laptop still connected to the projector. Alara stepped toward me, but I didn't stop. I clicked. The screen shifted. Keenan appeared again. Same shirt, same background. But this time, no cuts, no edits. I said the truth. I didn't lie about Grandma. And I'm not sorry. Silence. No one clapped. Malvina's face didn't move, but her eyes did. Hard, cold, calculating. A few family members looked down. One cleared her throat. Alara reached for her wine glass like it might save her. I let it hang there, just long enough. Then I opened the small box Keenan had carried in. Inside was a photo of Harlan, printed and framed, with a note in Keenan's handwriting. "For the one who always told the truth, even when it hurt." Signed, from Laverne and Keenan. I walked over and placed it in the center of the table, right in front of Malvina's untouched cranberry sauce. No one spoke. Alara looked like she was about to, but didn't. Malvina stood slowly, excused herself without a word. I returned to my seat, finished my drink, helped Keenan with his coat. As we walked to the door, a cousin stood. "We should talk later," she said quietly. I nodded. Outside, the air was cool, clear. Keenan took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom." Back home, I lit a candle on the kitchen table, set our own framed photo, duplicate of the one I'd left behind, next to it. No applause, no audience, just quiet. In my journal, I wrote, "Sometimes you don't need a fight. You just need a mirror." The house was quiet when I opened my eyes. Not the kind of silence that feels cold, but clean, settled. Like the dust had finally landed, and I could see where everything stood. I got up slow, no rush, walked to the kitchen and past the fridge. There it was, framed photo of Harlan and Keenan, right where I'd placed it. No one had touched it. No one would. No texts. No missed calls. No backpedaling messages from Alara. Nothing. And for once, the nothing didn't feel like exile. It felt like air, like finally being allowed to breathe my own space. I made coffee, took it black, sat at the table and looked out the window. The street was still. Even the neighbors' porch lights were off. Then came the knock. Light. Barely a sound. I opened the door and saw Hannah, Alara's daughter, standing there in her puffy jacket, cheeks red from the cold. She held out a folded paper, hesitant. "Grandma said to give you this," she said. Then quieter. "I wrote something too." I took both papers and invited her inside. She shook her head. "Mom doesn't know I'm here." I nodded. She turned to go, but paused. "You were always my favorite aunt." I held the door until she disappeared down the sidewalk. At the table, I opened her note first, crayon handwriting, blue and crooked. "You were always my favorite aunt. I hope you're not mad." I folded it once, tucked it into my journal without a word. The second paper was older, thin, folded with more care. My name written on the top corner, not addressed, just acknowledged. It wasn't sealed, no envelope, no stamp, Dated 2 weeks ago, Malvina's handwriting. I've always been harshest to those I feared the most, because I knew you were stronger. Maybe I erased you because I was afraid of being seen. No signature. I read it twice, slowly. Then I stood up, walked to the sink, lit a match and held the paper over the flame. It curled, blackened, fell into the basin in silence. Some things don't need to be mailed to be received. I spent the next few hours pulling photo albums off the top shelf. Ones I hadn't opened in years. Most were in order, some weren't. I began sorting, pulling old photos out of sleeves, relabeling them, adding captions in my handwriting, reclaiming the corners they'd tried to erase. This happened. I was there. I mattered. Keenan wandered in, curious, sat beside me, pointing to photos. "Who's that?" "That's me. That's you. That's Grandpa making fun of my mashed potatoes." We laughed. He turned serious. "Will they ever ask us to come back?" I smiled. "That's not the point anymore. We're not waiting for a seat. We built our own table." Later that night, I wrote one final entry in my journal. I didn't get an apology. I got clarity. And sometimes, that's better. I closed the book and placed it beside the framed napkin Harlan once folded into a red leaf. The first Thanksgiving I was ever invited to. Keenan and I ate leftovers at the table, lit 2 candles, said nothing special, but he raised his glass of apple juice and said, "To being exactly who we are." I nodded, and that was enough.